Good morning, good evening. You're listening to ID Global Networks. My name is Adnan Siercic. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for tuning in. This is the second episode. I'm so excited. We have double the pleasure, double the fun, double listening of me chatting about different things, but you're in luck. It's not just going to be talking the whole time. We're going to have an action-packed episode. We're going to be talking with the Chief Information Security Officer from Washington, D.C. area. Also, we're going to be talking new tool of the week feature with Adrian Godot. I think this is going to be very exciting. We're also going to be talking a little bit about some of the conferences that are happening in the area, and maybe even talk about the dinner of the week or that I've had. I definitely want to share with you. And just before I start, the thoughts and opinions do not represent my past, current, or past employer, full-time contract, or anything otherwise. So first thing that I want to talk about are the different security conferences. The podcast is focused on knowledge sharing, so therefore we're sharing some of the conferences that I believe would be very useful. Again, if you guys have a conference that you guys are attending that you believe it would be beneficial for others, please put in the comments and send me an email. The first conference I would like to mention, it's called Security Session. It's in Brno, Czech Republic. It's on April 7th. We have Cyber Central, which is going to be in Prague, Czech Republic. That's April 11th through 13th. We have Blockyard. It's in Gdańsk, Poland, April 13th. We have Qubit, which is also in Prague, Czech Republic, April 18th through 19th. And we have eSecurity Conference. That is in Belgrade, Serbia, and that is going to be from April 25th through 27th. I'm going to put all these conferences and URLs in the show notes. We're here to not reinvent hot water. We're here to do knowledge sharing. I believe that every security conference, not only does it have useful information, but also the people that you go to the security conferences that you get to meet, you get to exchange ideas. That is, I believe, the most useful. The networking, sitting down after the conference and being able to talk about your problems. Of course, you don't want to talk about confidential information about your company, but definitely, I found out that usually I was able to get the most out the conferences by talking to the people. Even some talks are very useful, and then you have these workshops that people put together that you have to do hands-on training. Maybe you usually work in policy and you want to get your hands on some of the cool tools. Definitely go out and check them out. Oh, and also don't forget the parties. Usually have really great after parties. Get to connect with people, and then say you don't make a really good friend until you have a drink or two with them. I'm going to make a transition here into our first interview for our show. So I'm very excited to be presenting here. CISO that comes in from Washington, D.C., as I mentioned already. Reason I think this is kind of the right lead-in, right way to start is because, in general, to start a program of IT security program, you need to start from doing assessment and then setting up policies and starting from actually the top-down approach. Hello everyone, we have CISO on our line. He's a CISO for a large organization in Washington DC area. He's done a lot of consulting experience performing risk assessments and strengthening IT security postures of organizations. We are here with Corey Bob. Corey, thank you for joining and taking the time to talk to us.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. Look forward to a good discussion here.
Definitely, definitely. Well, hopefully you got your glass of wine ready and filled up, and
Of
we'll,
course.
yeah, definitely. So we'll just jump into the conversation. I would definitely love to hear a lot about the experience. And when we start with what is actually a purpose of an audit?
Purpose of an audit. Yeah, good question. Actually, there's kind of two paths to this answer to approach it holistically. There's audits and there's assessments, and there is a difference between the two. A lot of people use those words interchangeably, but the reality is they're different. They're definitely different. For example, audits are typically performed by outside parties to an organization for some sort of certification or regulatory validation of their adherence to some sort of statutory regulatory set of rules. Risk assessment is typically that done by internal teams, such as internal compliance teams, corporate auditors, stuff of that nature, kind of to identify any risks to the organization slash business, and then identify the gap analysis to go ahead and mitigate those um, you know for the business itself. Um, so that's basically the difference between the two, and obviously both of them serve a purpose for varying things relative to security, the security program of the organization.
Sure, sure. So, we'll since the podcast is focused on IT security, we'll keep it at IT security, and we'll say, usually what standard do you prefer to run, assessment against?
Sure. So running an assessment, typically, at least going back to consulting experience, generally the organization already knows what they need to certify or choose to have their security assessment ran against. They'll have a come at you. Hey, I need to do PCI, or I do work with medical stuff. I need to be HIPAA. So they kind of already know. I don't think I've really walked to an organization where I told them what I was going to map them against. So I guess it kind of again it depends on the organization and what it is they're trying to achieve, and typically they'll already know what they need to achieve. And then as an assessor, you'll be helping them do that.
Okay, so let's say, I'm a company and, regulators come in and say, hey, you got to be a client, you got to be, compliant to PCI DSS. And you're going to say, okay, great, we got to hire someone that actually knows what this is. How do you, they call you in to say, hey, can you come in and help us out? How do you actually, set up a strategy to be compliant?
Yeah. So that's a good question. You got to remember, compliance doesn't necessarily result in good security. However, good security will most likely result in compliance. Something an old boss used to tell me, and it holds true. If an organization tells me they need to be PCI compliant specifically, there's four different compliance factors under PCI themselves. It's tiered 1 through 4. So it really depends on what it is they actually need to be. And a lot of them don't know. At least some of the ones I've done in consulting, they're not. They get typically their bank tells them hey, you got to be PCI compliant because they have a merchant account. They get their first ASV scan, authorized scanning vendor, and they don't know how to remediate. And that's a lot of in the consulting realm that I've dealt with clients in that nature. They don't know what to do, but they do got to be compliant, or they're not going to be allowed to process credit cards, fines, etc. Strategically, as an overall strategy for any security program, compliance, audits, assessments, I typically believe in there's 4 pillars to having a successful security program. I think those 4 pillars are vulnerability and patch management, software, hardware configuration management, good hardware and software configuration management, mechanism to control the elevated and privileged user access, domain admins, root access, things of that nature, and essentially the people part, right? Security awareness program, and I mean a program. I don't mean a death by PowerPoint, looking at where they got to do it once a year and that's all they get. It's got to be an ongoing, programmatic, always in your face type of thing, so people are aware. Otherwise, it's just a check the box kind of thing.
Definitely, definitely. But, we're already talking about step, 2 or 3. So you're a CISO. You're trying to fight against other departments for the money. So as the head as the head of organization, as someone that they look at as usually just a money waster, how do you ask for money from management?
Yeah.
How do you fight for it?
Well, the easiest thing is to provide the dark cloud, right? The sky is falling routine, and say, hey, if we don't do this, all kinds of bad things are going to happen. Just kidding. That's definitely not the way to do it. I mean, most organizations, the key is going to be business case justification is critical to obtaining any kind of money from the financial apparatus of an organization. Knowing and understanding on how to talk to them, I think, is key to getting that money. You can throw all kinds of technical reasons, and this they're not going to understand that. A CFO is not going to understand what an IDS IP is, how much it costs, and why it costs that much, and what exactly it does. But if you can go to the same CFO and talk to things of total cost of ownership, return on investment, things that they understand, how they map to identified risk. The cost of doing, the ability to do that, win points with the CFO, and you're speaking their language, and that to me is the ultimate way to get money, or a better chance of getting money. Let's just say that.
Sure. So what is one trick that you can share with the audience that really worked for you to be at least to get that, at least to have them, kind of grab their head and say, oh my God, maybe we should, get, the newest type of malware protection or the newest firewall?
Tricks. I find that, I don't know if it's about tricks. I mean, I think it's being able to convey what you need, why you need it, and being able to justify it. It's not really I would say, a trick thing to do. But you gotta, these are the kind of discussions you're going to have, and not only CFOs, it could be the people that actually manage the fund, straight on up to the organization's board of directors. Those are the ones that control all that stuff. And understanding how they think in order to get what you need is critical to that process of obtaining funds.
Sure, but you also want to, even though it is also having them understand, you also want to have a kind of a buddy system, right? You want to have a good relationship with with or a CIO of above you, or if it's a COO or with the CFO as well, right? So
right.
I mean, you probably want to, I don't know, I'm sure you go golfing with them sometimes, you got to keep.
Well, I don't play golf, but
Oh,
maybe if I did. No, I mean, to your point, what you're saying, one of the things of being a CISO is honestly is relationship building, because that's what you have to do. I mean, you're part of the organization as identifying all these different risks and technical things to parts of the organization that may or may not necessarily understand what you're even talking about. And in order to, you have to build those relationships so they trust you. They understand that, hey, when this guy comes to talk to me, he knows his stuff, man. He knows what he's talking about. And that's critical at any leadership, executive level scenario. Is be able to build those relationships. So when it comes to a time you have to go to the CFO, and if you don't play golf, you can talk to him and get what you need.
Sure. So, you get your money from the management. You bring in, Corey to do the risk assessment, and they say, all right, look, we got to get these tools, and let's say you even get the money for the tools, but then someone's got to run those tools. How hard is it to find good people?
That's a good question, honestly. Right now, it's a challenge. I'm not going to lie. If you may have heard, the projections right now are something to the neighborhood of, by 2020, 1.8 to 2 million open jobs, specifically in the InfoSec space, which means everybody's going to experience this problem. The question is going to be, how do you overcome it? How do you find those people in that area? As 0.0 unemployment rate right now in cybersecurity, information security. So how do you find the talent? It's a challenge. It's going to be for each organization to identify how they're going to do it, how to draw those people in, and then once they do, actually keep them.
Let's say you do find someone that you enjoy working with. I mean, do you try to bring those people with you? I mean, and what kind of tricks do you use to bring them with you?
When you say bring them with me, what does that mean? If I leave or go somewhere else?
Yeah. Well, let's say you I mean, it makes sense, right? I mean, in my experience, CISO usually has some people that they rely on, certain expertise. If they stay within the same city. I mean, do you?
Sure. Absolutely, and that's a good question, because as you know, with any organization, when management, your leadership changes, a lot of times they do bring their own people, And of course, every leader is going to have those that they trust. They've worked with in the past. They know they know how each other operate, and they do. And then when you get to management, leadership, executive level, those are the kind of things that you weigh when you take on a new job or a new position or something. Like, okay, what do I have to do to make this happen? And of course, you're going to bring people you trust and know that are going to help get the job done. And in the end, make you look better. I mean, that's what it's all about, right?
Yeah, definitely. I agree. People make you look good. You work hard to keep them. It's a nice relationship. So I do have a lot of people asking me, I would love to get into, IT security or cybersecurity.
You and me both. How do I get on your team? How do I do cybersecurity? Yeah. Believe me, I hear it too.
Yeah. So, they say, hey, look, let's say I've been doing this I've been doing finance for 15, 20 years, and I see you guys are making a lot more money. What
about the money.
All about the money. So how do
about the money?
What do you tell people to, if they don't want to transfer? Do you tell them go to masters? Do you tell them, hey, just, get technically good by, doing work on the side, or you tell them go take a certificate? How would you recommend someone?
Yeah, and this is probably one of the most questions I get all the time. How do I get on your team? What do I got to do to be cybersecurity? And my canned response is typically go do something, right? Go do something that's not security. And what I mean by that is go run a network. Go get a CCNA. Run some Cisco internetworking, routing, switching, firewalls, VPNs. Understand the networking aspect of it. Go be a sysad, Active Directory, Linux, Unix. Understand those type of things. Fundamentally, you have to understand those concepts prior to coming to security, because if you don't understand how they work in the first place, how are you going to be able to secure them? And if you have no hands-on experience with packet capture, understanding how packets work, right, and you're doing network level security, firewalls, whatever. You really can't expect to learn something in a master's class or any other kind of class. You got to get the experience in doing that. And I think that's some of the difference between what I see in the field, and probably one of the reasons why there's going to be so many job openings, is you get a lot of people that, they can check the box in black letter of the law, whether you're following your policies, but they can't offer a solution if you're not meeting that or if there's a gap. And I think that's the difference between good security people and people that just, there to check the box or validate if you're doing something or not doing something.
Yeah, I agree.
That's my opinion.
No, I agree. But actually, there are actually people that know how to do this, but they're too lazy to do it. It's not enough just to get smart people, but it's hard to get smart people that actually want to do work as well, and that share your strategy as well and your vision.
I will say laziness is not a characteristic that is typically acceptable in any IT organization, whether it be security or otherwise.
Yeah,
sysads work around the clock. They get the calls at 3 in the morning. I got them when I was doing sys administration work. So there's really no room for laziness, I don't think, in the areas if you want to do this job. If you are, I don't think it's going to work for you if you are kind of lazy.
Yeah, that's true. But if there are a lot of jobs out there, they can definitely blend in a lot easier.
Going back to the root question here, what do I tell somebody that wants to find something that makes makes you motivating, right? Find something that you're passionate about. Maybe it's networks, maybe it's software, maybe it's coding. There's a lot of aspects of security that once upon a time, I know from my experience, go back 20 years, you were security if you were a sysad. There was no security team. you were it, and you had to understand and know all those things. Now it's just like the way IT went. There's a lot. Once even in regular IT, you were the only person, so you had to know. Now even in regular IT, it's so specialized, and security is moving in that same direction. You have people specialized in application security, network security, or policy and process. So the subcomponent of information technology and cyber is basically also becoming that same thing, very specialized in what certain people do, and that you can't know everything. You can't know the whole realm.
That's true. But so I did a show, my first show, and actually I had some lessons learned.
What'd you learn? What'd you learn?
What did I learn? I learned that the more I learn, the less I know. There's that one.
The more you
But
learn, the
yeah.
more you think I may not know nothing, kind of
Yep,
thing, right? So,
exactly, exactly. But what are some lessons learned that you'll be able to pass on to the people while working? Maybe they're just starting off, or maybe they've been working for a while. Like, what are some of the lessons learned that you want to share your wisdom to the
um,
world?
share wisdom. Nobody's perfect. Make mistakes, man. Some of the best stories will be the mistakes you made in a server room or a data center, and what you took down, right, and got chewed out for. I mean, those are the things you learn from, man. Nobody's, this is an imperfect industry. If you think about what IT as a whole, and I'm not talking just security too. We are problem solvers. The only time we are called to do a lot of things is when things are broken. We're always breaking. Things are always for us to fix. It's security is the same way relative to it's a cat and mouse game. Especially in the security realm. But lessons learned. I mean, I learned a lot of lessons over the years. I think everything that you do that causes you to get feedback from is a lesson learned. And I think if you take those things and help them formulate moving forward, it's always going to be a step in the right direction to a successful career, whatever that is.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So I also mentioned that to take risks and to not be afraid to fail. So I'm glad we're thinking on the same wavelength.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, if you without failure you can't succeed. I mean, that's kind of one of the things I've always stuck in my head.
As long as you learn from them and don't make the same mistakes.
Absolutely. Don't make the same mistake twice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. So I know you're a technical guy. I've known you for a while. I know you're a hands-on kind of a engineer and everything else that you've been doing in your background. But we have different types of CISOs. We have CISOs that come in, just doing policy, and then they
Hmm.
get into leading sometimes very large organizations. Based on your experience of working under people and being the CISO, do you prefer only policy CISOs, or do you prefer only technical only, or like a mix? Like what do you think would be the best way to go?
Well, considering when you're a CISO, there's usually not another one, so I don't think you really have to worry about that. But relative to leadership and management in the space, other CISOs, other maybe management director level, maybe below and stuff like that. In the security realm, I think there is some. I think there is. I would prefer people with a technical background, only because they're solutions people, right? They're not check the box people. And then I think for a security program, that's important because they got to be able to think on the spot. They've got to be able to, in a gap analysis, understand, well, what do I got to do to fix that, right? Or how do I recommend that to the other parts of the organization to fix that? CISO role, the cybersecurity department, and security teams in general these days are growing. I mean, 20 years ago the CIO didn't have a seat at the table, right? And the CISO experiences that a lot today, and they're just coming around to understanding that a CISO is really a risk management from the technical side to the business. You're seeing a lot of, even just on an organization or some of the other CISOs that I congregate with in various networks and such. Once reported to the CIO, that's on a downswing. It's very hard to report to the CIO things that the IT team is doing that are against policy and stuff, right? I mean, it's kind of a conflict, right? I mean, you can see that there.
Yeah, I mean they care about functionality, a lot more
Um,
than actually the security.
yeah, but I mean, going back to leadership and technical backgrounds, I mean, obviously a good manager may not necessarily have to have technical skills. They can lead, they can manage, and that's huge. Having the technical background, do I prefer it? Only if it's. That's a kind of a tough question because I have it, so it's really hard for But if you're a leader like me, I try to rely more on my people than my technical background, right? I mean, they're the ones in the trenches. My technical background may be something that I knew 10 years ago, or 5 years ago, or whatever. I try to rely more on, from my perspective, on their technical background more so than the leader. So a good manager, a good leader that can do that to take the information that's given from their technical people and be able to make a decision. I think that's the key to any leadership or management role in the security space.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on a lot of the points, but we're gonna back away a little bit from the audit assessments and sometimes the boring stuff, but necessary. And since I'm a technical kind of a guy, I definitely like to ask you. I've actually been in an organization that has highly praised open source tools, saying that they actually do even more work and work better than enterprise. What is your opinion?
Whoa, you're not sucking me into the enterprise commercial versus open source discussion, are you?
That's right. That's right. What do you prefer, enterprise or open source?
Honestly, I prefer whatever can get the job done. There are some open source tools that will far exceed the commercial versions. There's some tools, like I said, it depends. What needs to be done. Budget is always something that plays into this relative, to what you can use. I don't have a preference, honestly. Again, I prefer anything that can get your job done.
So then, if you had, management gives you enough money to just buy one tool, unlimited money just for one tool. What would that one tool be that you would think you'd be able to at least minimize the most risk in your environment?
Say that one more time. Let me think about that one.
No problem. So
you're saying it.
If you had just one tool that you can get, be able to minimize risk. So for example, they say you can only get antivirus, or you can only get advanced firewall, or you can only get endpoint encryption. What is one tool that you would rely on the most to actually protect your environment? And this is the only tool you'll be able to implement.
This is going to sound kind of weird, and I don't know how you would turn this into a tool.
Mm-hmm.
Something or a tool that could increase the knowledge of the user base. You could throw millions of dollars of hardware and tools and software at a security issue. But in the end, it's the end user, the employee, that's the weakest link that will bypass anything that you just threw at it, money-wise or tool or whatever. So if there's like an injection into the brain, or whatever you want to call it, something that can educate users in a more efficient and effective manner, they'll always be your weakest link, and those are the ones that need it most.
Or organic chip. I like that.
Yeah, something like that. That would be great.
Well, but if users then, act the way they're supposed to, that we wouldn't have our jobs. So we don't want to go that successful. We still want to keep our jobs. So we still want people to make mistakes and, cause malicious activities everywhere.
Again, going back to the question, and the reality is, in any security program, you can throw all the hardware and software you want on it. It takes that one phishing email. It takes that one, click on a link that the end user does. That's going to go right through all of those and bring, a problem within the network itself, regardless of how much you have on the front and the levels of protection you have.
Last thing I would like to ask you, and usually I like to share this, in my shows, and that is, what is the best meal that you had, this week or last week that you would love to share with our audience? Yeah, just I'm a food guy. I just love. Yeah. So, well, it doesn't even have to be the tastier, the fanciest. Something that
I don't
you
eat
just
much,
enjoy.
So, no, just kidding. No, actually I do. Last week, so that's I don't know if anybody's familiar with bonefish or whatever. Or fishbone. I don't know what it is down here. There's two of them in Florida. I go to the one that's here in DC too, right here in Pentagon City. Yeah, they had a awesome seafood risotto. It was amazing, actually. That was the best meal I had all week. I'll tell you that.
That sounds delicious. Risotto, seafood. It's a nice mix. I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to me, talk to my audience, share your expertise and knowledge, and hopefully we'll be able to get you back in the show, later down the road, and we'll be able to.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime. Coming back every time. It was a pleasure. Great question, and I hope I helped someone think about doing that career, or how you approach and get funding for things you need. If you're in the security realm, I hope it was helpful.
Corey Bob, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we're gonna do something different. We're gonna be actually introducing each week different tool that is free for use to, that I believe some of you can be using it even in your organization or just at home. Security doesn't have to be expensive, right? There's some really great tools out there, a lot of people putting in a lot of great effort to document, test, and help other organizations succeed. So therefore, I thought we should present this better than a friend of mine that has been working in the environment for quite some time. He has been really focusing on network detection and working in different SOCs, working for U.S. governments and private sectors as well. I hope you find a lot of useful knowledge, and definitely let us know what we could change, edit. And this is another goal of this podcast, is to share knowledge, things that are already out there that you might not have all in your lap, that are not available to everyone. It takes a while to actually research and find the right tools. So we're going to go in, we're going to pick up some tools, and we're going to try to keep this technical, but also if you guys do have any questions, feel free to put it in the comments or send us an email, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. And now, ladies and gentlemen, in the right corner we have Adrian Godoy, and he's going to be presenting the tool of the week.
Hello everyone, Adrian Godoy here, and today I'm going to be talking about this tool I found on GitHub called Rip Chrome History. I like this tool because it is a very simple tool. It's a shell script, focuses on Linux, it focuses on the bash shell, and it's just 75 lines of code. So it's very easy to implement, and for people that work in environments where they don't allow third-party softwares to be installed, you can if you really want to just type it out or copy paste it, and you can validate the code yourself. Doesn't do anything malicious. So the script itself has 4 main functions. It's able to, so essentially what it does is that it displays the Google Chrome web browsing history to the screen. But in addition to that, it can also delete the database itself. As you know, the browsers nowadays use the SQLite databases to keep track of all your web browsing history and things that you've searched and all that. So what the script does is that it uses SQLite 3 to query the database and then just provide an output of the data that's there. And the tool focuses strictly on URLs that were typed or visited. So the first main function is that you can delete the database if for some reason you want to do that. This has the same effect as just clearing your history from the browser itself. The second main function is the ability to export the data. Which is pretty cool because it lets you query the database, get the output, and then you can save that output into another file. It's in a tabulated format, so it's the data is primed for ingestion into some other system for analysis. Another thing that it does is that the tool can you can tell it where the database location is, and you can also specify which profile you want that information for. The output of the tool is pretty straightforward. It's got 2 columns. One is for the time. Time is in an epoch format. And the other column is for the actual URL that was in the browser. The things I really like about this tool is that it's pretty lightweight. It's a shell script, native bash, and it gives you the ability to export the entries, and you can send them to any file that you want. And the reason I like this is because with that in place, you can send the data to a file that then you can monitor with some sort of agent, and you can start ingesting that data into your SIEM for analysis at a wider scale. And this is pretty cool because this gives you the data from a point really close to the user, and therefore it's a little bit of higher quality, because as data moves along, for example, if you're getting your URLs from your firewall logs, for example, sometimes there's data that's not missing or that's missing and you don't know why. This will take you closer to the user and give you that data. The format of the data is also makes sense for this, because you got the time of when the actual URL was typed or entered, and then it gives you the URL that was typed. So it's perfect. You got columns, you got the time, and then you got the data. Perfect for ingestion into a SIEM. These are some things that I would recommend for improvement on the tool. Because of it being a bash script, it only supports Linux and Unix. So I've heard word on the street is that there's a couple users out there using Windows, and they use Chrome on Windows. So that could be it's the same concept could be used on the Windows side to generate the same output. That way you can have some sort of script that you can deploy to your Linux endpoints or to your Windows endpoints and get this data from everywhere where it is.
What are some prerequisites that one would need to have on their environment to be able to actually run this?
So because this is a shell script, right? It's this bash script, and if you're running Linux, it runs pretty much natively. The only thing that I'm not sure if it's comes with Linux as the default is the SQLite 3 client. So that might be on the Linux side might be a pretty easy install, from your package manager. On the Windows side, it might be another exe that you got to install or something like that. But yeah, that is the only prerequisite because the database is in a SQLite format. You need the SQL client to query the data. So I've only used the tool. Well, I mean, the tool only works on Linux, so I've used it on Linux. But I think that it would be non-trivial to port it to the Windows world.
So is there any way to be able to run it on a Linux and then remotely collect the logs from a Windows machine?
So if you want to do it that way, you could, from Linux, remote into your Windows boxes and pull down like the actual SQLite database, and then collect the database on a Linux client or a Linux-based OS.
Sure. And
then parse them all with this script and produce the output, and then ingest it from there. So yeah, you could do that. But yeah, the problem is that Windows is not very SSH friendly yet. But you can use other things like Samba or file shares and things like that.
Sure. So if the user actually clears the browser history or uses like a private browsing, you're not going to be able to collect that data, correct?
So that's a good question. I'll have to check and see what Chrome does when it's running incognito mode. There might just not be a SQLite database at all, but there might be one. And it could be that it creates a profile that it runs during incognito mode and has all the history for that one session, and then when you close the incognito window, that profile disappears. So it could be that it does that, but I'm not sure. I have to look into that. But that's a really good question.
Right, and what I was thinking then, and it probably it grabs it whenever you run the script. But if you can have a task when you notice that the browser is up and running to automatically run that script, even if it's a incognito mode, maybe there's a way to grab that, right? So I think there could be some potential automation you can implement to be able to use this without having to pay a lot of money to get an actual enterprise level tool.
No, definitely. So some of the other suggestions I have for this is that it looks like the tool by default only grabs data from the default profile and from the current user. But from my perspective, it's iterate through all the user directories and look at all the different history databases that are out there, regardless of profile. That's what I would do. It's regardless of profile, regardless of user, just get me the data from all the databases that are out there that contain anything. So then you tie that into some sort of scheduled task where you run it every 5 minutes. So if you all of a sudden start an incognito session and the tool runs during those 5 minutes, then that data, if it's available to the tool, would also get ingested. Make sense?
Yeah, and what you can do in your environment, you can disable usage of private browsing. So if you're afraid of inspecting SSL traffic, right? And if for some reason you can't inspect SSL traffic, but you need to get the data of the computer's of the user's computer, workstation, or whatever it is, this will be a good way. This will be a good cheap way to do it.
Yeah, no, that is a way to do it as well. So I mean, the only drawback is if you're doing a cell inspection, you will get like the full payloads or ability to access the full payloads. With this, you're only getting straight URL. So another thing that I would do is that I would parse the URL field itself, into like HTTP, but it wouldn't hurt to do it beforehand. But I mean, it depends. You can do it both ways, but whichever way is the path of least resistance, I guess. Oh, another thing that I would do is that the history database. So I call it the history database because it's literally called like history, but it's the database that contains all the history, the web browsing history for Chrome. So that database has a lot of other useful information that the script could easily parse and then add it to the current output. One of the fields that I liked is the ability to tell you if the user typed the URL or the user clicked in the URL. It's just got a lot of more other data that could be available and easily added to the script. Just a matter of editing the SQLite query, and then you got that data into your scene, which is pretty good data to have. As far as the use cases for the tool, it can be used for a forensic investigation. Again, like I said, the tool is very lightweight and the output is very simple, just time and website that was accessed. But as far as the output being admissible in court, I don't see a problem with it as long as it's being like peer reviewed and validated. But I think that there's probably other tools out there that do a better job as far as being, accepted in court. But what I really liked about this tool is like what I spend the most time talking about is like how you can use this tool to just get the data and then get it into a SIEM where then you can do analysis to find anomalies. I think that's where this tool has a lot of potential, and definitely. I definitely see myself trying to get some of this data into a SIEM for analysis. And that's pretty much the gist of it. It's, like I said, it's a pretty straightforward tool. It does one thing and it does it well. And there's some things that I would like to see it do a little bit different.
Well, you heard it here from Adrian. He's going to be giving us the weekly information or recommendations based on some freeware tools that can be very useful in your environment. As Adrian, a very experienced analyst, been working in the industry for quite some time, he'll be able to inform you on some of the great tools that you can be using to improve your investigations. And again, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, we'll leave our contact information in the show notes so we can continue on this conversation. And for the last part of the show, I'd like to talk about the food of the week. We got grilled skillet, cooked salmon with quinoa, cucumber, greens, walnuts, and topped with balsamic vinaigrette. For drinks, I had Fresh as Hell Is by Samuel Adams with it's a lager with orange blossoms. Thank you everyone for listening to the show. I hope you guys found some interesting things. I definitely had a lot of fun making it, and I'll see you guys next week. Good night or good morning. Like for some reason my recorder stopped. I don't know what the hell happened. It was recording and then it just stopped just too long ago and I just restarted it. So I'm gonna edit this and I'll see how much it did not record. All right.
Oh my God, this amateur hour over here.